Snow fell like silent ash over the mountain road, coating the abandoned gas station where Marcus huddled with his daughter, their breath the only sign of life in the freezing dark. His truck had died miles ago, just like the life he once dreamed of after leaving the Marines. Every door in town had closed to him, every face turned away when they saw his skin. But when the roar of 20 motorcycles broke through the storm, Marcus didn't know whether to pray for help or brace for something worse. That night, salvation wore leather and came with a past of its own. Marcus Holloway had once worn a uniform that demanded respect. 12 years in the Marines had taught him discipline, endurance, and faith in the idea that hard work would eventually pay off. But war didn't end when he came home. The medals on his shelf couldn't stop the bills from piling, the contracts from drying up, or the bank from taking the house his wife had dreamed of. When she left, broken by the constant struggle, all he had left was his 6-year-old daughter, Nia, and a promise to keep her safe. That night, the blizzard had swallowed everything. The sky pressed low and gray, the snow thick enough to erase roads and reason. He had tried to make it to the next town after the last motel turned them away, but the truck's engine coughed once and died beside a faded gas station. The cold crept in fast. He wrapped Nia in his jacket, whispering prayers into the wind, his mind racing through the years that had led him here. How a man who once commanded troops now couldn't even find a warm place to rest. The world didn't care for stories like his anymore. Then, faint through the howl of snow, came the sound, low, steady, mechanical thunder. Headlights slashed through the blizzard, 20 bikes riding in formation, their riders faceless behind mirrored helmets. The ground trembled beneath them. Marcus stood still, torn between fear and fragile hope. Sometimes, he thought, help doesn't come from where you expect. Sometimes it rides straight out of the storm. The bikes circled slowly, their engines rumbling like thunder under the snow. Headlights cut through the storm, glinting off chrome and leather as the riders dismounted, one by one. Marcus's breath clouded in the air as he pulled Nia close, unsure if this was rescue or reckoning. The leader removed her helmet first, a woman with sharp eyes, streaks of gray in her braid, and the kind of calm that only comes from surviving too much. She scanned Marcus silently, then turned toward her riders. A nod passed through them like a quiet command. No words were needed. Without hesitation, they began unloading supplies. Blankets, fuel, food packed in waterproof cases. The woman approached Marcus, her gloved hand offering a thermos. Her jacket bore an insignia, a winged gear wrapped in gold embroidery, and the words Iron Halo MC. He didn't understand. Bikers didn't usually stop for stranded men in the snow, much less a black single father. He had learned that kindness often came with conditions and help had a price. But the woman's eyes didn't carry judgment. They carried purpose. As the night stretched on, the women worked in rhythm. Some fixed his truck under the glow of portable lights. Others built a windbreak out of tarps and snow. Their movements were efficient, almost military. Marcus recognized it. Discipline born from hardship. When the storm finally eased, they gathered around the fire, and he learned pieces of their story through fragments and gestures. They were a group of ex-employees from a powerful logistics company, women who had built their CEO's empire until he left them bankrupt to save himself. Instead of breaking, they rebuilt, turning their motorcycles into symbols of defiance, riding across states to help those society had forgotten. They called it Operation Shelter Line, a traveling convoy for the displaced and desperate. Marcus listened, humbled. These women had faced a different kind of battle: gender, class, and betrayal. But they recognized his fight instantly, the invisible war of trying to survive in a world that judged him before it heard him. When morning came, the road was clear, and his truck roared back to life. The leader, the CEO-turned-biker known as Mara Quinn, handed him a card. No logo, just a single phrase burned into the metal. We ride so others can stand. Marcus stared at the words long after the roar of engines faded into the mountains. For the first time in years, he didn't feel abandoned. He felt seen. But the world outside that snowstorm wasn't ready for what came next. Because once a black father and a pack of rebel bikers crossed paths, the town that turned him away would soon face its own reckoning. By the time Marcus and Nia reached the nearest town, the storm had cleared, but the cold inside him hadn't. The streets were lined with old brick buildings and unspoken rules. He stopped at a small diner, hoping to buy Nia something warm. The waitress froze when she saw him. Her smile faltered, eyes darting toward the manager. Within minutes, the message was clear. They didn't serve people like him here. Marcus felt the same quiet humiliation he'd endured too many times before. The tightness in his chest, the forced calm that came from knowing anger only made things worse. He took Nia's hand and turned to leave. But before he could reach the door, the deep growl of engines filled the air. Every window rattled as the Iron Halo bikers rolled down Main Street, 20 chrome beasts under the winter sun. They stopped right outside the diner. Mara Quinn dismounted first, her boots crunching against the snow, her eyes fixed on the crowd gathering in silence. She didn't need to speak. The message was written in every woman's stance. In every headlight blazing through the morning mist, "We see you." The townsfolk stared as the bikers began unloading boxes marked Community Relief Fund. They stacked food, medicine, and warm clothes right on the sidewalk, a public reminder of the compassion the town had refused to give. Marcus stood beside them, not hiding this time. Nia clung to his coat, wide-eyed but unafraid. In that moment, the illusion cracked. The same people who had turned away from a freezing father and child now watched a group of women outsiders do what they could not, show humanity. When the last box was placed, Mara met Marcus's eyes, a silent acknowledgement of battles fought differently but for the same reason. That day, the snow melted just enough to reveal the truth. Decency didn't belong to any race, gender, or class. It belonged to those who acted when others stayed silent. As the sun dipped behind the snowy hills, the town grew quieter than it had been in years. The bikers rode off in a slow, deliberate line, their tail lights glowing red against the white horizon, a trail of courage vanishing into dusk. Marcus watched until the last engine faded, a strange stillness settling over him. The same people who had shut their doors now stood on their porches, unsure how to feel. Shame had a way of creeping in slowly, like the cold that had once numbed his hands. But Marcus didn't stay to see if they'd change. He had something stronger than their approval. Proof that compassion could still exist, even when the world refused to show it. He fixed up his old truck and found work in a nearby veteran's garage, where the pay was small but the dignity was his. Each week a letter arrived from Iron Halo MC stamped with their emblem, updates on new missions, families they'd helped, shelters they'd built along the highways. Sometimes, enclosed in the envelope, there was a simple note from Mara Quinn, "Keep driving forward." Years later, Marcus would tell Nia about that night. Not the cold or the fear, but the moment when strangers proved that kindness could roar louder than hate. In the end, the story wasn't about rescue. It was about recognition. The moment a black father, forgotten by his country and his town, learned that humanity still had riders on the road. And maybe that's what this world keeps missing. Not heroes, not saviors, just people who decide, on one freezing night, to stop for someone who looks like they've been left behind. Because every time someone chooses to stand instead of turn away, the storm loses a little more of its power.